love the spot. Tina and Ellen, I just want to say I really, really appreciate your messages. They were very meaningful for me. And Reverend Jim, I appreciate the fact that you allowed us to dedicate this entire month to nonviolence, the theme of nonviolence. When I look at the messages that are sent from our church, peace is such an important part of it. It's in our affirmation. It's in our mission. It's so many places that I look. That is so important to Unitarian Universalists. I appreciate the music that Beth chooses for us. She does such a great job. She just started being the music director and she chose such meaningful songs, and Bridget, the song about the president saying Amazing Grace. So thank you. And of course, I appreciate that Beth has stuck with the most difficult position of being our Sunday service tech. And it's running well. We got through several videos and it didn't crash. Yes. Every year, Interfaith Action of Southwest Michigan provides materials to all area churches for a religious service on gun violence prevention. And I will be referencing those materials in my talk. I did specifically ask that we could have this service on the prevention of gun violence. Usually, most churches do it in June. I think that's Gun Violence Prevention Month, something like that. But it fits in really well with our theme this month. So why is gun violence a religious issue? I think it's because most face across the world discourage violence, especially murder. Usually there are exceptions, like government-sanctioned war or criminal penalties, but most religions hold life as sacred. As Interfaith Action puts it, as communities of faith, we value the sanctity of life and we work for peace in our communities. Gun violence is a threat to those values. The Christian Gospel of Matthew tells us, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called the children of God." One of the 10 commandments states, "Thou shalt not kill." And our first UU principle stresses the inherent dignity and worth of every person. Taking a person's life is the greatest insult to their dignity. It basically says your life is worthless. The injured party is left with no dignity, no worth, and no life. What's worse is that some Americans suffer disproportionately from gun violence, as Tina so well pointed out. African Americans who were only 13% of the US population in 2010 were 55% of the victims of gun homicide. In 2017, African American boys and men aged 15 to 34 years were the most frequent victims of firearm homicide in the US. In Michigan, just in our state, Black people are 20 times more likely than white people to die of gun homicide. That's leaving out suicides. If suicides are brought in, white people are actually more prone to gun deaths via suicide, but 22 times more likely to die by gun homicide. Some of these deaths involve children, as Tina so happily pointed out, who are innocent bystanders. Women, too, are frequent victims of violence. From 2015 to 2019, 90 women were fatally shot by an intimate partner in Michigan alone. Sadly, as with Tina, I've had experiences with gun violence. My own family has been affected by gun violence. My grandfather committed suicide with a gun. My family was so ashamed of this that I didn't find out until I was 30 how he really died. But far more traumatic to me were the suicides of two of my son Evan's friends. In high school, his friend Austin Murphy killed himself with a gun. He was only 14. In college, my son's friend Ryan Wolf committed suicide using a gun. Both young men used guns owned by family members. Ryan's mother told me at the funeral that they were a gun family. These were all lives with inherent worth and dignity. They had promise. They had contributions yet to be made to the world, but they were depressed and had easy access to a gun. In 2016, an Uber driver in Kalamazoo engaged in a mass shooting, killing 6 people he did not know and injuring 2. One of those people worked at my daughter's daycare. Her name was Mary Lou Nye. She was sitting in a car parked outside of Cracker Barrel and was gunned down for no reason. How do you explain the senseless loss of life to a child? We will never get rid of all crime, but we can make crime less dangerous. Guns are easy to pick up and easy to use in a moment of passion, a moment of insanity, or deep depression. If my son's friends decided to kill themselves with pills or carbon monoxide poisoning, they would have been much less likely to die. Firearms are the most lethal method of suicide, with a lethality rate 2.6 times higher than suffocation, which is the second most lethal method. In addition, individuals living in a home where firearms are present are more likely to successfully commit suicide than those who do not own firearms by a factor of 3 or 4. In fact, 90% of all suicides attempted using a firearm result in death, as opposed to less than 3% of suicide attempts involving cutting or drug use. If the shooter in Kalamazoo had used a knife instead of a gun, he would have not been able to kill 4 women sitting in a parked car. It is significantly more likely that a death will result when either the victim or the attacker has a firearm. The mortality rate for gunshot wounds to the heart is 84% compared to just 30% for people who suffer stab wounds to the heart. In the US, states with higher gun ownership rates have higher rates of gun homicides and homicides overall, but not higher rates of non-gun homicides. I don't think it's realistic to eliminate guns in America. I do, however, think that we can bring down the numbers of deaths and injuries. Around 85,000 people are wounded by guns each year, and close to 40,000 are killed. About 60% of those deaths are suicides. This breaks down to over 100 Americans dying by gunfire each day and 200 being wounded. What would it mean to cut these numbers in half? What would it mean if 25,000 fewer families lost a member to suicide each year? How much could suffering be reduced? What would it mean if 18,000 fewer people were killed by gunfire homicides each year? And remember, this is just half, especially among young African-American men. What would it mean for their families and their communities? My hope is that through education, sensible legislation, economic development of impoverished communities, and better gun safety, we can minimize unnecessary deaths. These deaths are the ultimate insult to human dignity. And now I just want to share a few words from the Interfaith Action Sunday Service Guide. On this day, we remember those who have taken their lives with a gun, those who have died in school shootings and mass shootings, those who have died by gun in the course of an argument or from abuse or by accident during the commission of a crime. We lift our voices in sorrow and frustration, knowing that every life is infinitely valuable. We give thanks for first responders and all those whose duties bring them to the streets, the lobbies, the malls, and homes where the carnage of gun violence takes place day after day. May they have courage and sound judgment in the heat of the moment and compassion for the victims. We also remember teachers and administrators who put their students' needs ahead of their own safety, who must ease children's fears when conducting active shooter drills in schools. We hold in our hearts all people impacted by gun violence, as gun violence knows no boundaries, but can affect all nationalities, races, cultures, faiths, genders, and socioeconomic classes. It can affect us where we live, where we worship, where we work, where we study, and where we play. We hold dear the memories of those lost to gun violence, and we treasure those lives permanently injured in senseless acts of violence. We look for strength for ourselves and others in our families and our lives who have been touched by gun violence. Just want to have a silent pause for a moment, and during the silent pause, I invite you to offer the names, either silently or aloud, of those you know who have been affected by gun violence.
Mike Sherman.
May we all be instruments of peace.
Yeah, thank you, Joanne, for that. That's very, very powerful message. Notice that we tried to be fair and balanced here, but there is no one speaking for pro-violence today. So my gunslinging brothers and friends would have a response to Joanne, and that response is that freedom has a price, and that it is very important for us to have guns and freely have any kind of guns we want, so that we can keep our government honest. That is the mentality. I don't know whether you agree with it or not. I do not, but that it would be what they might say. Has someone by any chance taken my sermon with them when they Thank you, Joanne. I didn't know that was if that was like an unconscious message. So I would like to start with a story. It is not my story. It is Dorothy Long's. She has, however, graciously agreed to let me tell it. Several days ago, she left her wallet on the hood of her car while she took care of some outside tasks. She forgot it there. A few hours later, Charles drove off with the wallet still on the hood. When Charles returned, his wallet was gone. Dorothy was, of course, feeling some stress over this. Several hours later, much to Dorothy's relief, a neighbor returned her wallet. The neighbor that found the wallet had found the wallet on the street. Now here's where the other shoe drops. Dorothy's neighbor decorates her lawn with political signs that reflect a far different point of view than Dorothy's. One of the signs reads, referring to Gretchen Whitmer, "My governor is an idiot." When Dorothy told me the story, she remarked that there was some feelings of incongruity over the situation. It turns out that the neighbor was actually a good and honest person who just happened to have a radically different political point of view than Dorothy's. It is my opinion that one of the biggest problems we face as a nation is a toxic political division that I fear may pull us apart. Gun control legislation is only one of a few hot button topics that serve as wedges to further deepen this divide. As you know, I also hold the opinion that our political problems are all at root spiritual problems. As spiritual problems, they fall under the auspices of our work as a faith community. So how do we address the spiritual problem of villainizing people who have different points of view than we do? Let's begin with a theory. This is a theory that has been around for a few decades and was advanced by the late cultural anthropologist and Pulitzer Prize winner, Ernest Becker. Becker thought that we as culture using animals who are aware that we must die are terrified of our own coming deaths. Becker thought that our points of view, the individual culture models we use for navigating life, become for us a defense mechanism against death anxiety. If we did not have this defense against death anxiety, we, Becker thought, would be crippled by terror and despair. Consequently, when we encounter someone with a point of view on such things as gun control, reproductive rights, whether to get vaccinated or not, our climate change, we feel as if we are under existential threat. Our death-denying defense mechanism, which is the villainization of those with whom we disagree, kicks in. We unconsciously and automatically project onto the other our own destructive and crazy tendencies, so we do not have to feel death anxiety. The other becomes evil, bad, crazy, or just plain stupid. This is, of course, not true most of the time, although sometimes it is. The people we are projecting on are just ordinary people like us trying to get along the best we can. By the way, the sign in the neighbor's yard, "My governor is an idiot," is an excellent example of the villainization that occurs when the death-denying defense mechanism is operative. Now, you may be thinking to yourself something like, "I don't know what you're talking about, Jim. I never feel that way towards another person just because they have different opinions than I do. I am nothing but goodness and light." If so, I suggest you test Becker's theory by thinking of someone in your family or a friend who you secretly think is an uninformed idiot or in some way mentally deficient for having a point of view different than yours. Can anyone think of anyone in your family that you have thoughts like that for? Okay. So Becker's theory might be pretty good. Okay. Those feelings of contempt are just fear transmogrified into anger. Now, I might be wrong. If there's anyone here who does not have a loved one, a friend or an acquaintance who arouses anger in you over differences in worldview, please see me after the service. I want to sit at your feet and learn your secret. The Buddha was teaching one day. A man from the back of the room walked through the crowd to the dais where the Buddha spoke and spit in his face. The Buddha calmly wiped the spittle away and said to the man, "Thank you. I had wondered if I could still become angry." Here is my prescription. Be conscious. When your feelings of anger and contempt come up over differences in worldview, you are probably using the above described defense mechanism against the fear of death. When we are aware of our death-denying defenses, we are less likely to see those with whom we disagree as villains or idiots. When we see the disagreeable other as just a person, we are less likely to get into shouting matches our nurse feelings of superiority, our resentment. With this clearer vision, we might even be able to feel some compassion for the other who is also dealing with a messy life and, just like you and me, struggles with what it means to be human. Who knows, we may even be able to learn to love one another even if we differ wildly in perspectives. Another important thing, if you are viewing Fox News, ESPN, Stephen Colbert, Tucker Carlson, Bill Maher, or Ann Coulter, chances are one of the reasons you enjoy them so much is because they are very proficient at reinforcing your death anxiety defense mechanism. They are very skillful at helping us project our darker qualities onto the other. I lay much of the reason for the January 6th riot and other societal dysfunction at their feet. I'm not saying you should stop viewing. I'm just saying pay attention to your spirit when you do view these pundits. Now, here's the bottom line. First, keep an eye on your own spiritual life. When you are tempted to condemn, feel angry towards, or judge another for their point of view, your defense against anxiety mechanism may be being activated. Secondly, when you are in a judging mood, stop to consider that the targets of your ire are probably good people doing the best they can with what they have, even if their political points of view seem to you as if they are dreamed up by a troop of insane monkeys. And third, always keep in mind that you probably sound a little crazy to some of the others with whom you disagree, and that you could, in fact, be wrong. In my opinion, that if we follow this prescription, we may be able to actually experience compassion for others with whom we disagree. The Dalai Lama said, and I've repeated this often, if you want to be happy, practice compassion. If you want others to be happy, practice compassion. It is compassion for ourselves and for our political adversaries that will get us out of our current national toxic mess, and that will lift us up to a greater way of being. There's a prayer by St. Francis of Assisi that I especially like. It goes like this. And interestingly, it coincides very well with how Joanne ended her message today. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there's hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. Grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, and it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. And St. Francis here is not talking about physical death. Okay, let's continue. When we do the spiritual work of identifying the operation of our death-denying defenses, we are more likely to become instruments of peace, simply because we are not projecting our own capacity for destruction and craziness onto others. Plus, when we bear our own stuff, we become a little more free. So let's now do some meditation. There is in the deepest stratum of the human psyche a place of stillness. We have long recognized that when we sit with the stillness that our sufferings are entangled, and that we often achieve states of happiness, gratitude, wonder, and love. From the stillness flows a manna that reveals life's goodness and the experience of being fully alive in this moment. If we go to the stillness, our hearts can be healed. Let's open ourselves to the healing stillness by going there now. As you're able and willing, assume a comfortable position with your eyes closed and just breathe. That is all you have to do. Just focus on your breath. Don't worry about your thoughts and emotions. They will take care of themselves. Just breathe in and out, in and out. Find your stillness and yet let your soul rest there for a moment. and come back to us. And let's have our final hymn.
The words will be understood. This is my song, O God of all the nations, a song of peace for lands afar and mine. This is my home, the country where my heart is. Here are my hopes, my dreams, my holy shrine. But other hearts in other lands are beating with hopes and dreams as true and high as mine. My country's sky